Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to TECNTV.com and the inception of one of our brightest new stars. I want you all to know that this young man came to me by way of Dr. Reisman just a few months ago as we were entering in terms of the conversation regarding pedophilia and the sexual revolution and the dramatic impact of Dr. Kinsey on the LGBTQRSTUVWXYZ and the P movement, and as well looking at all of the dramatic things that have taken place in terms of people's lives and their livelihood as a result of relationships that have been swayed by the false information given to us by Hollywood and by the mainstream media. And he proved himself a very cognizant and brilliant young counselor. And immediately, with Dr. Reisman's encouragement, I was like, John, you have got to do a show on our television program, on our television network, TECNTV.com, because people are hurt. They're broken. And John relented to doing it, and I am just earnestly pleased and proud of the fact that Jon Uhler will be doing his new program starting tonight. It is entitled Journey to Healing, featuring Jon Uhler. It will be every Friday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. I want to introduce to some and present to others Jon Uhler. Good evening, John. It's a great pleasure and honor to have you on the air with us tonight. I was like, John, you have got to do a show on our television program, on our television network, TCTV.com, because our and John relented to doing it, and I am just earnestly pleased and proud of the fact that Jon Uhler will be doing his new program starting tonight.
There may be a delay. Can you hear me, Ken?
Delay. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. You and I'll. This will be a challenge technologically. There's a delay. I'm not hearing anything on my end.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Well, sorry.
Let's see
about
if
that,
I
John.
Can you hear me now, Ken?
Yeah, can hear you clearly.
Because I can't hear you.
Okay.
I can hear you on my other computer. There's a little bit of a delay.
Exactly. I'm sorry about that.
There may be a delay. Can you hear me, Ken?
Well, you're broadcasting extremely well tonight.
You and I'll. This will be a challenge technologically. There's a delay. I'm not hearing anything on my end. Okay. I'm hearing myself through the other computer, so my apologies.
No problem.
For
no problem,
okay.
John. Hey, this is one of the great things about live television. This is why I love live television.
I can hear you on my other computer. Okay. We'll have to. We'll pretend I'm in South Africa or something, and you can.
There you go.
You can ask the question. There'll be a little bit of a delay.
Yes.
I'm hearing myself through the other computer.
Okay.
So if you want to ask a question, Ken, and then I'll hear it.
Okay. Well, John, First and foremost,
That's
why
right.
would you do a television program working on relationships with people?
Okay. We'll have to. Uh, we'll pretend I'm in South Africa or something, and you can. You can there'll be a little bit of a delay. Yes.
There we go.
I'm hearing myself through the other computer. Okay. So if you want to ask a question, Ken, and then I'll hear it.
Okay. Well, John.
Okay.
First and foremost, why would you do a television program working on relationships with people?
Oh, okay. I just heard the question. So again, folks, my apologies for the delay. Ken is very thoughtful right now because as he has given me this time slot, this opportunity, I was fastidiously trying to prepare in terms of technology, and then my computer went down. So I'm a much better therapist than I am technician. So we'll try to work with this, and I imagine we'll have things worked out by next week.
Oh, yeah.
Ken asked me the question, why would I take this opportunity? And I'll turn myself down there. I think this is a wonderful opportunity, hopefully in a number of respects. First of all, it's nice for me to be able to kind of change where my focus has been recently. For the past couple of years, it's been on child protection, protecting women and children, dealing with what I call the trans deception. Because of my background now, half of it was dealing with survivors and also kids in the system, actually 2/3 of it. And then spent 11 years, a little over 11 years in the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections on psychology staff, dealing with a wide array of folks, of men, especially sex offenders, the full continuum of sex offenders. So I've learned a lot that I did not learn in graduate school. And therefore, that's part of what I deal with. But it's nice to be able to get back to counseling, doing regular kind of counseling. So I'm excited about that. I'm also excited about the opportunity to approach counseling from a Christian perspective on this channel. I'm adept at both secular and Christian settings, but I think what's nice is from a Christian perspective, we have the opportunity to approach us, ourselves, holistically, body, soul, and spirit. From a secular perspective, it kind of sticks with what they usually call cognitive behavioral therapy, or dealing with the thoughts and the beliefs and all those true that affect behavior. But also, ultimately, it doesn't really touch much about the deepest part of us, the spiritual part. Some people will say, well, that's our soul. But as Christians, we know there's something beyond that. When we die, we just don't fall asleep, or we don't go out of existence. So, and what's nice is, especially from a Christian perspective, that when there's stuff going on that is difficult to get at, for me, it's nice to know that I'm not alone, that I can actually ask the Lord for wisdom, and He will grant that. In Proverbs chapter 2, He promises that if we seek wisdom intensely, like someone seeks after gold or silver, that we will be given that. That'll be a gift to us. And oftentimes, the folks that I work with, it's not that they're not bright. I work with a lot of bright folks. Unfortunately, there's things just beyond our reach. I oftentimes will use the idea of an iceberg. There's a lot more of us beneath the surface than there is on top. And Psalm 139, verses 23 and 24, that really for me is the crux of counseling. That's the place to start, which says this: search me, O God, and know my heart, which is interesting because it presupposes there's a part of me that I don't know. So search me, O God, and know my heart. Show me my anxious thoughts and my hurtful ways, and lead me in the way everlasting. Now that's out of the New Living Translation. But that's interesting that, way before modern psychology, way before Freud, David, who lived about 1000 BC, he knew there was some part of him that was very active, but he just couldn't get at it during those times that were troubling him, or when he was in a lot of distress, or when he should have been attending to parts of him that were very active that he didn't understand. And with that, I'm referencing the affair that he had with Bathsheba, one of his best friend's wives. Well, that's pretty significant. So it's nice to know that the two primary things that we all deal with, which is anxiety, and that really takes into account a lot of things, because aside from organic issues, when there's something unsettled, there's a part of me that knows it, and it will kick in the fight-flight syndrome. It'll kick in my endocrine system, and eventually it will produce adrenaline. And the effects of adrenaline are anxiety. And if that goes unattended for a significant amount of time, then I will find myself getting depressed. Because depression, really, all things being equal, it's anger turned inward. There are genetic and organic factors, but all things being equal, the two primary issues we all deal with are anxiety and depression. So when David says, Lord, search me, know my heart, show me my anxious thoughts and my hurtful ways, that has to do with my selfishness, or Freud called it the ego. So the two things that will cause us issues, the two things that will mess us up, are anxiety, or our response to things around us, and our selfishness. And those become the focus and the focal point of counseling, to help someone begin to figure out what is their stuff and what is not their stuff that they're wrestling with. Because really the goal of any human being, from a counseling perspective, in my estimation, is each person needs to own their own stuff, no more and no less. So that's counseling in a nutshell, and that's why I'm excited to be able to cover a number of different topics over the next number of months, and then hopefully moving into the next year or so. We're going to start with grief and loss for a couple of reasons. The first is that the holidays have a way of bringing things up, and understandably. So we will talk about grief and loss. And the other thing is really the root of the vast majority of the issues we deal with are grounded in unresolved loss. Grief is the process of coming to terms with loss. So not just because it's the holidays, but because it's the holidays, there are a lot of people that may not have addressed things during the year that are starting to, or will start to, experience things. And I think will be able to be helpful. So, Ken, I'm not sure of the time, how we're working this, since we have a delay. How are we doing? I'm aware that it's 8:15, but do we need to take a break, or do you want to ask a question, or
no? I really
let me know how you want to work this, folks. Our apologies. There's a delay here, and I can't really hear Ken.
Okay, so what I'm doing in the chat roll, which is very vital to this particular show, because those who want to receive counseling and services.
Sorry about that, and I can't see.
No problem.
Okay,
for those of you who would like to have questions over the next few weeks, and hopefully over the next few years, but you want to do it anonymously, you can go into the chat roll at tecntv.com and you can ask your questions.
Ken, should I log back in?
No, you're fine.
Should I try logging back in?
No, you're fine. You're fine right there. Because
let me do that.
Okay.
I'll log back in. Maybe that'll help.
Okay. Well, what we're going to do,
I'll be back.
And I would encourage everyone to do this as you're watching this particular program, as we're getting started. And there are some technical issues in terms of getting started always with a program. There is no picture perfect programming, but there is a perfecter that we all pursue in programming and getting news and information out to you. So, for those of you who are watching Jon Uhler tonight, and you're having issues with grief, you're having issues with loss, you're having issues with life, liberty, the pursuit of life itself, this is that opportunity where you can come into an environment where you don't feel that you're part of a group setting where everyone's looking at you, and you don't have to pay a hefty sum for one-on-one counseling. You have an opportunity to ask your question of Jon Uhler, and Jon, who is an experienced counselor, both in the Christian as well as the secular marketplace, uh, has been endeared to us by the Lord to provide guidance for you. Now, I want you to understand that there is a difference between guidance and as well, um, let's see, express direction. We'll put it that way. Guidance gives you someone who hears your pain, someone who understands what you're feeling, and provides a series of uh, of answers to you in order to follow getting the direction that you need in your life. Now, I would encourage you to make certain that you go to his website for more detailed one-on-one counseling. Sponsor net, forgive me, support sponsor dot survivorsupport.net. There you go, survivorsupport.net. Um, After the show, so that you can get more one-on-one uh, counseling. But guidance is to give you a number of remedies or a number of answers to follow in terms of your remedy to your issue and or concern. It is not a requirement for you to obey the words of Jon Uhler. That's the point I want to get across. Express direction. You see, Jon's going to give you some ideas. Jon's going to give you some guidance. And then he's going to encourage that you become a part of a one-on-one counseling environment, because it's very well needed when you have that one-on-one attention to deal with your issues and your concerns. Um, but I want you to understand that in no way is there any intent to mislead, to misguide, or misdirect. Jon is responsible for providing good counseling points to you and encouraging you to make the next steps necessary to help you overcome the issues and the concerns that you have to deal with on a daily basis. Now, we want you to know at tecntv.com that we sincerely care about you and your well being. And the best remedy to overcome issues, concerns, and problems is to address them directly. Jon Uhler is a master in terms of providing the counseling and the coaching one needs to help deal, firstly, adequately identify their issues and or concerns, and then learn the answers that are necessary to find the ultimate solution to overcoming those. So I want to take this particular moment to thank survivorsupport.net for sponsoring Jon Uhler on this particular network. The organization is there to provide counseling for you as well as guidance. The intent is not directed to any one particular direction. You can have secular as well as Christian counseling at survivorsupport.net. There's even a division that deals with church support. So there's a number of options that are available to you, and we want to go back now to Jon Uhler, who has put together a wonderful presentation tonight regarding grief and loss. Jon, are you with us tonight?
Let's see if you can hear me now.
Perfectly, perfectly, Jon. Great
Wonderful.
job.
Oh, thank you.
You are a technical genius. There you go. You're going to have to
Yeah,
give up this counseling gig.
we'll be dealing with the topic of stress, and this technology tends to stress me out.
Exactly. Now, Jon, as you're on the air tonight, a lot of people tend to go to their counselor first and foremost on the last resort, number one. So they're completely stressed out and erratic. And then secondly, they go to make their counselor their friend. I want you to speak to both of those particular points in terms of when someone needs you, and then secondly, are you a friend, a loved one?
Good point. Great questions. It's understandable that people wait until the last minute. Part of that's very normal because we want to try to fix things. What I would say is oftentimes people wait too long to reach out and talk to somebody. Um, Part of counseling is reconnecting with someone. Now, that's the question is the therapist your friend? Um, Technically, no. Hopefully they are friendly, but they don't know you. They don't have any history with you, and they won't be in your life, hopefully, forever. So it's a strange relationship. I'm not saying it's a bad relationship, of
Yeah,
course. Um, but ultimately, a good therapist understands that he or she is to work themselves out of a job.
yeah.
And plus, you don't pay a friend. Um, Counselors make a living doing this, and hopefully they've worked hard at understanding certain things. So, our we do surgery of the soul, or I believe someone who is a good therapist does that. As a matter of fact, the word psychology means study of the soul, and so a workman is worth their wages or their hire. But ultimately, the friendship that you have, I would say it's, and this is the best way to do it. Probably, it's a professional relationship
Yes.
where the therapist they can't read your mind. We're just people. We can't read your mind. Um, we're here to help you connect dots, but then ultimately to help you go back into your life to reconnect with the real relationships that you have. And again, it doesn't mean that you won't be connecting with your therapist, but ultimately, a therapist is sort of a physician for a time.
Mm-hmm.
We're a bridge to help you from where you are to where you want to be. But ultimately, it's also to help empower you, uh, to help you gain clarity. And so that's the role of the therapist. And what I would say is the indication that you might need somebody, and it's always important, as best you can, to ask around or to find somebody that you think has a good grasp of how people work. Um, it's better sooner rather than later to sit down and speak with someone because there will be indicators that things are not going all that well, and sometimes we put that off.
Now,
So
I want to abridge that point regarding the counselor because, of course, people are very vulnerable. And vulnerability is one of the things that they project upon others, but also in recognition of their internal strife, don't wish to exude to others. They want to always appear strong. So, in their vulnerabilities, sometimes people can take the relationship between the guidance of the counselor, the um, psychologist, or psychiatrist as somewhat more than what it should be in a professional sense. So, what would be first the boundaries that must be set, or should boundaries be set at all in terms of the relationship between the counselor and the counseled?
yeah, as a matter of fact, that's a very important thing. All therapists are trained uh, in that subject because it's a challenge to connect with someone as a therapist and a client. You're connecting on a very deep level, and so there's a natural tendency. Um, it is interesting. There's a natural tendency to draw close, but because it's an artificial relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Let me define that. It's not a genuine relationship in this sense. It's not that a therapist doesn't care. I care deeply about the people that I work with. Sometimes we have a tendency maybe to care too much.
Yes.
But the relationship will only go on so long. It's only supposed to go on so long. So it's sort of like a consulting relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So the challenge for the client is, how do you open up to someone? How do you open up to a therapist, a professional, knowing that at some point in time that's going to end?
Yes.
So that is the challenge. But I think it's important for the client to always keep in mind that the therapist is a means to an end. The therapist is a person, they're a trained professional, and they can help. But ultimately, the feelings that you are feeling in the therapy session, and this actually can provide useful information, will tend to replicate some of the feelings that you have in other settings. And so there is a dynamic or an aspect of counseling, especially in a relational, dealing with relational topics, that those issues that somebody has in their regular life can be recreated, and oftentimes will be recreated right there in the therapy session. And so Freud, in my estimation, kind of took it to an extreme, because his role as a medical professional, he kept a lot of distance, emotional distance. And as a matter of fact, the movie What About Bob, the psychoanalyst, where they don't say anything. All they say is, well, what I hear you saying is. And that stuff drives me crazy. But his perspective was, and a part of it is very interesting, is that the less he showed of himself, then whatever was going on behalf of the client, and especially toward the therapist, and that's called transference. The therapist can point out or use that to help point out to the client that there seems to be some stuff going on towards somebody they don't really know, meaning the therapist. And I wonder if that's come up for you before with other people. So there's a part of that that can be very useful. There's an aspect what's called personality disorders, and what that has to do with is somebody who has a long-standing way of approaching life and relationships. And there's a personality disorder called borderline personality disorder, and there's always organic and genetic things, but all things being equal, the root of borderline personality disorder, generally speaking, is injury of the soul, so to speak, and it comes through relationships. And so somebody then ends up approaching relationships in a very hot and cold manner, very back and forth, either or, very reactive. So they'll get close and then they'll back off, and they'll almost be driven to create a fight. Now some of us that have been married, right? Now it's like, wait a second, everything's going just fine, and all of a sudden they have to ruin it. I'm thinking in terms of relationships, but that's pretty characteristic of what's called borderline personality disorder, where it's not so much things are finally settling down, but now it's really calm before the storm. Exactly. And so if somebody's been through abuse, as a matter of fact, this is very interesting, and this can come up around the holidays, other times certainly, but it will also happen when it starts to get quiet. And that's why those that need the most help will tend to not seek it out, because they will keep themselves busy. And that's where churches and pastors that don't understand this, they sort of create a problem for people, because they keep people busy and sometimes too busy. And so we as Christians sometimes suffer the most, because we're not encouraged then to take time or downtime. We have 15-minute devotions, and we're off and running. And therefore we can run on fumes, and we can get burned out, and then we think that's part of the old nature, the old man, or a lack of spirituality, when it's not. It just means there's a part of me that has been needing to be filled and needing to be healed. but I haven't taken the time, and therefore all of a sudden I burned out. Kind of what David did in a way. The question is, how did he end up having an affair? And the first time I heard this, I didn't believe it, but now I give it a lot of credence. The chapter opens up and says this: in the springtime, when kings go off to war, springtime because now it's no longer muddy and chariot wheels can do their thing. But it's sort of like it's saying, what, David should have been someplace else, but something was going on and it was affecting his sleep. And that set him up for real issues. Now we would say the guy was having a hard time sleeping, so he turned on the TV and started to channel surf or went online. I don't think David was looking to have an affair, but guess what? He didn't take the time necessary. He didn't reflect upon his own psalm. Lord, search me and know my heart. What is going on? Why am I not able to sleep?
Yeah.
So,
Jon,
when people take the time, the Lord will help with that.
Jon, there are people who watch you and they're building a relationship of trust with you now that you're on the air. And sometimes people have a tendency to blame others for either their healing or their disrepair. And so I want to ask you to speak to the role that you have at tecntv.com and the expectation that individuals who have needs but have not expressed them should have in that relationship.
I view my role as a consultant here on the radio. I'm a therapist that's helping, or on TV. My role is to assist someone to do their own work. And actually, that's the role of a therapist as well. But because this is even more detached, I view myself as a resource. Hopefully, I've done my homework to where the topics that we will address, for instance, the first series we're going to deal with is grief and loss. There's a lot to that.
Yes.
But I will provide, hopefully, good and informative information that is reliable. And from there, the question is, what will you do with it? And so it's up to each person to take and do with this information what they will. It's sort of like from a New Testament perspective, the Bereans, when Paul was talking to them, he called them the most noble because they would go back and they would check up on or read through everything Paul said. So they would double check it. That's going to be vital for people to do with whoever they're listening to, so myself included. What's nice about this opportunity, Ken, because the station is a Christian station, I think somebody will be getting an additional level of insight because I will reference scripture, and ultimately that's where the hope and the help lies. The Bible is a means to communicate with God because it's the most historically well-preserved and miraculous book. And God has overseen the preservation of that book. Isn't it interesting that every dictator has gone after two things, which represents a promise that God has made? They've always gone after the Jews because God promised that he would keep them around, as promised Abraham, and through them the Messiah would come. And so for me, what's nice about the Jews is it represents God's ability to keep a promise. It doesn't make sense that people would always try to destroy the Jews. So I'm excited that the Jews are around. And now, does it make them special? No more or no less than any of us that are called, but still, they are his people. So I recognize that.
Yeah.
But the other thing is his word. A dictator will always go after the Bible, which is strange because the Bible will tell people to pay taxes and obey those in authority over them. So a dictator is crazy to go after that book, but it shows you it's the spirit behind it. So for what I will be bringing to the table, I'll be hopefully bringing wisdom and insight, but I will draw that from ultimately the scripture so that somebody can begin to do the work themselves. And that's also why I put together survivorsupport.net.
Yeah.
For me, as I had been doing therapy prior to working in the prison system, I had always wished there had been a resource, a website that I could direct my clients to in between sessions, that they could go and do their own work. I don't know if it exists. I was not aware of it, so I built it. And so survivorsupport.net is really, it serves twofold. It's an adjunct to therapy. So somebody who's now been made aware of survivorsupport.net, if you don't scour that entire website, you're not hungry enough. And that's what I tell people. How badly do you want it? Oftentimes the Lord waits. How badly do we want it? Proverbs, the beginning couple of chapters, chapter 2. If I cry out for wisdom, well, that's a very intense type of term in the Hebrew. Mm-hmm. So oftentimes I think what happens is we stop short because once I cry out, it presupposes I've finally tapped into the pain. So the resources there, survivorsupport.net, and then this then can serve on a weekly basis to help somebody really have additional information that they can take and begin to do additional work for themselves.
Jon, you work with a number of people who are doctorates and masters in religiosity, and they preach every Sunday morning, and they give out of themselves 6 out of 7 days a week, except for Mondays, of course. And they are degreed up. They don't need nobody to tell them what's wrong. They have been degreed up, and they can tell everybody what's wrong with them. You also have an organization called, I believe it's churchsupport.net?
Churchprotect.org.
Churchprotect.org. Now, let it not be said that I'm a wonderful counselor, and let it not be said that you're a wonderful counselor, but do these degreed up pastors and apostles and men of God and women of God, do they need counseling along the way sometimes? Ego all encountered.
I would say we all need help. There's wisdom in a multitude of counselors. If I get to a point where I think I'm okay, and the question is this: it's not what I think about myself, even though we may all think we're all pretty wonderful. The question is, what do the people around us think about us? For husbands, the question isn't so much what do you think about you as a husband. The real question is, and vice versa, right? We'll flip it around. And then ultimately the question is this: how do the kids feel? And I raise this question, and you know what? Maybe this is it shouldn't be unique to me as a counselor, but I really try to apply everything first. I think biblically that is our responsibility, because in a way it's a position of leadership, spiritual leadership. But I ask people this question, and I'll address this to guys, to men right now. Mm-hmm. Men, when you drive out of the home in the morning and then drive into the driveway after work, the question is this: what happens to the breathing? It may sound funny, but I'll define it. What happens to the breathing of those in the house? Meaning this: when any of us drive away in the morning, is there a sigh because they miss us, or is there a sigh of relief? When we come in the driveway, is it a sigh of eager anticipation because dad's home, or dread and everybody starts getting ready to walk on eggshells? And that could be the same thing for women, right? Mother Gothel in the movie Tangled with Rapunzel, I would say probably 80% of the women that I've worked with over the years, part of what will come up in therapy is issues with their mother, a controlling narcissistic mother. And if that adult daughter has a narcissistic controlling mother, my guess is there was a father, meaning a husband, and guess what he was on the receiving end of? And so nobody gets a pass here. There's right. So ultimately, the challenge that I give to any of us is, what am I like to live with? Am I generally an optimistic person? Do I know how to laugh at myself? Meaning, do I lighten the mood, or do I place a heavy wet blanket on the mood of the home? Am I life-giving, or am I a black hole and am I taking and sucking the daylights out of everybody? Do I view myself as the king of the castle? Jesus didn't,
Yeah.
right? If the question is this, I'm hard on guys, but it's good. I ask this: if there's a last piece of chicken, I challenge you guys, that's not for you.
What?
Does your wife, right? Does your wife have to tell you to take out the trash? Really? Do you make the bed? If you're the last one out of it. Meaning, do you clean up after yourself? Just those basic things. What's it like to be married and to live with you? That's ultimately the challenge for any of us. And if I am, spewing toxicity, let me define that. And as a matter of fact, this is where the biblical concept, and this is such a major part of counseling. When David says, Lord, search me and know my heart, show me my anxious thoughts and my hurtful ways, and lead me in the way everlasting. To the extent that I am driven by anxiety or hurtfulness, meaning my hurtful ways, meaning I'm being hurtful.
Yes.
The biblical term for that is oppressive. So once somebody rewrites Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6, trust in the Lord with all your heart, don't lean on your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he'll direct your path. If I can't trust him enough, doesn't make me good, bad, or indifferent, but the reality is this: if I can't trust him enough, then I have violated, or I won't experience Psalm 91:1, which says this: he who remains under the shadow of the Almighty will remain stable and fixed. Isn't that great?
That's awesome.
That means come what may. And that's really what joy is. Joy is not happiness. Joy is in the midst of the storm. Can I be stable? And I'll tell you what, our homes need emotionally stable people, emotionally stable adults that we can bring life, we can try to encourage. I'm not self-absorbed. When I put my feet down on the floor in the morning, the question is, who am I thinking of? Am I thinking of myself, or am I thinking of others? So there's a whole lot that goes into, again, trying to make sure that I'm doing things right. But again, I've dumped the truckload on people I didn't mean to. But,
no, that's why you're here. That's why you're here.
That's why hopefully we'll have a long time.
Exactly, because John and I'm going. We got about 10 more minutes, 15 more minutes. Forgive me. So forgive me. A lot of these questions I hear people have, but they ask for a friend, and so here's one of those particular questions: is it possible that you're using Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, Martin Luther King's birthday, are you using those particular days to cover up the fact that you're not dealing with your issues?
Oh. Actually, could you clarify a little bit more?
In the sense of, we keep ourselves preoccupied with the holidays and the focus of all of the great things around it, but we're really not dealing with the things that are depressing us and keeping us isolated and down on the inside. We're using the holidays to cover us.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that's part of the challenge for all of us. The question is this, and some people ask, what is the goal of counseling? There can be a number of ways to answer that, but for me, probably one of the best responses is this. Actually, twofold. So how do you know also when you're finished with counseling? You kind of have twofold. One is, can I be fully emotionally present in the moment? Now that sounds like psychobabble, so let me repeat that and define it. Can I be fully emotionally present in the moment, meaning where I am, I'm all there.
Yeah.
Or have I got so much stuff going on that people are talking to me, and we've all experienced that. Right? We all get distracted by things, but the question is, wherever I am, can I be fully there? Jesus was. Right? As a matter of fact, how many times did it say Jesus saw the person? He saw the woman in the crowd. Nobody else saw her. The disciples did. Their agenda. But he was able to, and if anybody had the weight of the world on his shoulders, it's Jesus. Mm-hmm. But he was able to stop. As a matter of fact, remember he said, someone touched me. And the woman reached out, and the disciples, right? They're agenda driven. They're like Secret Service. And he stops, and you can imagine the size of the crowd. Mm-hmm. And he says, "Wait, someone touched me." And they're going, "Well, everybody's touched me." Isn't that interesting? So the question is this: can I discern the times that people need me? And I mean, as a dad, right? That talk about convicting.
Yeah.
Because I'm only going to have probably 18 Christmases with my kids, with each one, and then they're gone. And there's an old song, "The Cat's in the Cradle and the Silver Spoon," which one? From Harry Chapin or whatever. We're getting ourselves dated here, but that's such a neat song. You know what? Maybe we'll play it sometime, right? The theme of that was a father thinking back to the various ages and stages, and he just never had the time. And he made promises with his kid, and all of a sudden now he, as the dad, is retired, and he really, he would love to spend time with his kid, and he's called his kid up, and all of a sudden he's hearing in his adult son himself that, hey, you know what, we'll get together then, Dad. It'll be, well, I get touched. That's a good example of someone that got caught up all the time and then had regrets. David Cassidy, for those of you that remember the Partridge Family, I have in my Bible, I've taped it in the book of Proverbs, his last words. His daughter issued or discussed his last words, and then she thanked folks, all the well-wishers. But do you know what his last words were? And I've taped it in my Bible because I want that to serve as a reminder. And he said, "So much wasted time."
Wow.
So at the end of our lives, we don't want that. But I think what happens is twofold. When we have stuff under the surface, it's easy to keep going because that'll keep us away. So compulsivity means I'm like the little hamster on a wheel, and we Christians are the worst, and pastors feed into that, and they help contribute to that. It is not spiritual to always be busy. We can be a human doing, but not a human being. And if all I ever have are like 15-minute quickie little devotions, time to read, I'm not touching base with them. And what's nice is this: ultimately he wants to give me peace and rest. Think about that. That's a gift. Remember, he said, "I give you a gift that the world can't give you. It's peace of heart." And the question is, do I have that? And if I don't, that can be the goal. And there will be indicators. Body, soul, and spirit, we're all, all that is tied together. My body will show me, my body will tell me if things are not going okay. We call it stress. Stress is an accumulation of emotions that now the body's feeling that. So if I'm walking around stressed all the time, it's not an indication of spirituality. Right? Jesus was calm. He experienced peace. Exactly. So the goal of counseling is to be fully emotionally present in the moment so I can bring to bear in any given situation what's most needed, and it's a balance of grace and truth in each situation. With people that are wounded or anxious, they need grace. They need, 80% grace, 20% truth. With those that are selfish, they need more truth than grace. And once they come to terms with the truth, then grace is there for them. And ultimately, also, that's really a good thing to remember. That's sort of an indicator of how I approach counseling as well, trying to discern how much anxiety or legit stuff that someone is how much selfishness. We're never to have compassion on selfishness, by the way, but we're to have total compassion on emotions that come out of living in this fallen world and dealing with people, but especially oppression. Oppression is when I take my stuff and I put it on you. And that can be on a scale of 1 to 10. Can you in your life and your family, you experienced a 10? Somebody took something from you that never should have been taken, the most valuable thing. That is the biggest kind of weight. And so the question is, as we're moving through this life, and we have a little backpack, because it's interesting in the book of Galatians 5, and this is like kind of counseling in a nutshell as well. It says this: each man should carry his own load. The picture for that is an old-fashioned little knapsack that you sling over your shoulder. And that really is summarized in Proverbs chapter 1 and chapter 2. Certainly, or the word is a knapsack. That has to do with our responsibility. We are supposed to carry our responsibility, and we all understand that has to do with paying the bills and all that. But it has a little bit more than that. It has to do what is right, just, and fair. Proverbs chapter 1 and chapter 2. That is how I'm dealing with somebody else. So I am as spiritual as I am able to be right, just, and fair with another person. So the goal of counseling is this: everybody should carry their own knapsack, their own load. Each man should carry their own load, but then it goes on, but bear one another's burdens. So we each are to carry our own knapsack, no more and no less. If it's less, that means I've given my responsibility over to someone else. Now I'm a freeloader. If it's more, that means I'm codependent. That means somebody else, I've accepted somebody else's responsibility. A burden, we're to bear one another's burdens. That has to do with a boulder, because in this life, sometimes we will be handed something that has nothing to do with our responsibility. And those things can get stuffed. And if I am not keeping current with my emotions and the indications and the indicators that things are going on, they will start to ooze. They'll ooze all over people. They'll ooze all over my ability to be still in the moment. In this day and age, we say, my ability to unplug and be still. Yeah. If I can't be still, I can't know God. Be still and know that I'm God. And so the question is this, and I throw this out to people if anybody wants to kind of test, do they have stuff going on the inside? First of all, how are things going, blood pressure and other things like that? So your body will tend to tell you. But the question is this: can any of us be still for approximately 2 hours without any background noise or radio, TV, or computer devices? What would it be like to be perfectly still?
Wow.
And if I would find that nearly impossible, and the question is, when's the last time I was actually still? And if I'm not, then there's probably a reason why. And it doesn't make me good, better, indifferent, but the one thing that's true is I'm not able to receive the peace and the rest that the Lord has for me, because there's static, there's stuff there, there's a blockage. And that blockage, if I don't know what it is, it's gone inside of me, as it were, and I'm disconnected. And that's why I'm also disconnected from people. I'm a human doing rather than a human being. I don't know what it's like to connect deeply with people. I'm the hamster on the wheel, and that the Lord never intended anybody to be like that. What's nice is, from a Christian perspective, we have that resource, and the Lord wants to give that to us. He wants to be able to give us the insight into what's going on so that I can get out whatever baggage, whatever stuff is blocking that, so that I can finally start to experience the peace and rest. And that will guard my heart and mind in Christ Jesus, so that when difficulties happen, because in this life we're going to have difficulties, and hopefully I'm not contributing to it, because that means that's part of my stuff. So life is challenging enough, But then add people to that, and it's all the more challenging. But I think what happens also at the holidays is what I challenge people to do is this. Sometimes we're getting around people that we shouldn't, and therefore we're violating Matthew 7 because we are getting around people that really would be considered pigs, swine, and we're casting our pearls before swine. And Jesus is very clear. Don't cast your pearls before swine because they will trample all over them and then turn on you. And so oftentimes what happens is during the holidays, the reason why people end up gaining weight or other compulsive things of drinking too much, and how many fights happen, how many domestic issues happen in the holidays, ultimately because people are getting together out of obligation. And they're trying to keep a lid on it, so they're shoving food in or downing drinks in order to keep a lid on what they really want to say. So the question is this holiday season, are you getting together with people out of obligation or out of choice? If you had your druthers, who would you want around that table? And what I've encountered is this in my time working with folks is, a mile wide, an inch deep, and better to have just a few people in your life that truly appreciate you rather than getting together with people that nitpick. And that's where those explosive situations come from, and we see them in the news or read them in the newspaper that so-and-so, I had a horrible situation with another family member. The question is this: why were they even there?
Yeah. Choice is an immaculate thing to have, and you certainly don't want to use it. But in these final moments, Jon, and I thank God for you doing this show this evening. This is a great introduction to what you'll be doing on Journey to Healing. In the sense of Journey to Healing, the scriptures say that virtually Jesus walked with them. And the whole idea behind you is that walking for a time period. But what should people bring with them on the journey to their healing?
I would say a desire to have peace and rest.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want that more than anything, and without that, you're no good really to anybody. At the end of the day, especially yourself. We're going to give an account of ourselves. We are stewards for our time, energy, resources, relationships. And the question is, how am I doing? And also, how am I doing to myself? And I will be able to provide information for you. And then I would say it's up to you to take that and be serious about it. And go to survivorsport.net. There's a wealth of information there for you. And then take the time you need to heal. Take the time you need to figure out what's causing the static, what's causing you to not be able to be still. And there's a lot of indicators of unresolved grief. We're going to talk about that next week. The Lord wants you to be able to have joy, and that has to do with stability and have peace and rest.
Jon, you are an amazing counselor, a wonderful human being, a great person, and I thank you so much for taking on the challenge of TECNTV.com. And me personally, because I'm crazy. But once again, how can people get in contact with you after hours? Not just in the chat role that we have here at TECNTV.com where they can be anonymous, but where can they go after hours to talk with you?
Right on survivorsupport.net. As you bring up the home page, you'll see a link. And so just click on that link and it'll take you right to how you can arrange to get in touch with me, and it'll indicate that I consider it consulting. So there's a consulting fee, and then we'll arrange schedules. Also, if you want some training for your organization, for your church, especially as we go through grief and loss, I also do predator protection training because there's a lot of predators that end up in churches, and that's why very few pastors know many survivors. And churches need to be safe places for people to be able to unload and to find safety. And unfortunately, too many people go to church and they don't feel safe, so they just go through the motions.
Exactly. Jon Uhler, tonight with us, ladies and gentlemen. Journey to Healing. This was the intro to a consummate healing for America, a healing for you and for me. Jon Uhler tonight. Thank you so much for being with us. We look forward to his session next week on grief and loss and how to deal with it, especially during this COVID Christmas season. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank y'all so much for tuning in to TECNTV.com. Share this video. This link will be found at BitChute. It will also be found at YouTube, TECNTV, and as well the Exceptional Conservative Show tomorrow morning. I encourage you, men and women of God, it is unfair to carry the burden of oppression in heart and soul when you can easily turn it over to Christ and his counselors. Good night and God bless you. We will be back in just a few with the Exceptional Conservative Show live from the nation's capital. Good night and God bless you.